So this is the kind of final session of the day. We've got a panel up here. I'm going to ask each of them for their reflections on the day and on where we think we are in terms of hyperlocal community journalism and reporting government in Wales, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Up on the screen there we've got the special site, the Tumblr site that's been set up with a lot of today's stories and content up there, and that I think Matt will confirm will stay up there and hopefully get added to some extent, so that reflects a little bit of what we produced during the day. But I wonder if I could start at the far end there with Matt Appleby from Earth. Matt, you've been here, you've been writing stories, you've been under pressures of deadlines, but what's your reflection on the day, and what have you discovered?
I think the first thing I'd say is it's fantastic that this day has happened at all, and it's brilliant that National Assembly and Cardiff University has made it happen, and that they take the whole hyperlocal movement as seriously as they obviously do. I think in terms of, it's been really interesting this morning, going from that kind of political briefing and kind of trying then to draw out the very, very local stories from what we were given this morning. I chose to do the assets and community value story, which clearly has kind of great impact in any community potentially, and it was great to be able to find all the assets we needed, either on the Assembly website and then through the press officers to bring people to us to interview. So I think that's been great. Whether we'd be able to do that as volunteers on a kind of daily basis remains to be seen. But I think the really valuable thing out of today is to have made those contacts and to now have that network, so that that we can try to do more of that.
And can you just tell us a little bit more about what you followed up today, and whether you think there's you discovered anything that you would continue to follow up in the future?
Definitely, I think that that community asset story is one that could potentially run, and the reason I chose that was because I actually wanted to use it as a question to our readers about what potentially were the assets in Roath that people might be interested in kind of trying to protect, and I also looked at the school deprivation grant. And I've got kind of half a story there already, just waiting for some quotes, and spoke to the local school about what they do with the money. So I think there's a story there that we can follow up and see how that develops over time. And then the third one I picked up on the PCSO mention in the Labour Party briefing, and then ended up interviewing people about recycling rates. And I know there's a report going through the Assembly at the moment, so when that report is published, I've got some great quotes and contacts to be able to do that story in a month or two's time. And
just finally, Matt, how difficult did you find it to make that connection between a debate at policy level and people's lives in your community?
I think there's another level in it, which was the political debate, and there was quite a bit of kind of you said, we said, it was our idea, no it wasn't, it was your idea, the sort of political stuff this morning, which is entirely irrelevant to us, not interested in reporting the debate. When you get to the policy, it was actually reasonably straightforward to just think, okay, is there an angle in that very specifically in a very small part of the city, not even just at a Cardiff level for us personally. And it was great that when we did get AMs in here to talk about it, they had that local knowledge, they were able to give us local examples, and that was really positive that they were willing to sort of have those conversations at such a local level.
That's really interesting, because of course a lot of the traditional media spend a lot of time at that political level, which you're saying really isn't very relevant to you and your community. So that's an interesting kind of contrast and approach there. I should have said at the beginning that for those of you who do or prefer to speak or listen in Welsh, we do have translation with the headsets on the chairs if you want to use those. Ben, can I move across to you? How did you find it? What did you report? What did you learn? What might you take forward?
I agree a lot with Matt said, really. What was interesting was having access to different political parties. It's not something I've done much of in the last 2 or 3 years. I've been running my blog. The story I chose to follow up was the pupil deprivation grant. It was easy to make it local because I got all the specific figures for some secondary schools in my town. I knew the politician that I spoke to wouldn't have the detail of how the money was spent in the particular schools. So as part of the blog idea, I sort of promised to sort of follow up with some of the schools in the area to see exactly how it's been spent. One learning thing I've learned is being a sort of one-man band and the pressure you're under, and being here till today, I made a bit of an error in the story I published. Not an error, something I have to follow up. one of the schools that I spoke about, which is going to receive some money, is actually due to close in a year or so. And it's a story I've covered. I've been to meetings. My daughter's going to go to school in a couple of years. And I just missed the fact that on the list, this school is getting a grant and it's closing. So I posted on my blog and on my sort of town's Facebook page. And the first comment was, isn't that school closing? So I need to find out and either backtrack and apologise or, whether it's just because the pupils are there and they move into this school. I don't know.
Right.
But it was just, get the links, get the quotes, get the video, press publish quick before 2:30. Yeah. And I just missed the fact that the main stories in my town.
Yeah. But do you think you would normally have, because you'd have had a little bit longer, you might have been able to work that through?
I would have spotted it, yeah. I literally live 100 metres from the one school. It's it's just
interesting.
Again, it's about the pressure I find is being on your own. You don't get someone checking your stuff, rereading it. I've had people tweet me back saying, well, that's a bit inappropriate, or stuff I've written, because the speed it was quick today, but it was more about being in a room full of people. I'm quite used to just doing a quick 30-second clip and posting it. I've got no qualms about that. But I'm always willing to spot mistakes and correct them or clarify. I think in this case it's more of a clarification rather than a...
I think that's a really issue for hyperlocals. One or two people I've spoken to said that actually coming together and being able to support each other is quite an important aspect of what we discovered today, and I'm sure in other times as well. Emma, obviously you work at the university at the Centre for Community Journalism, which is there to help nurture and support and develop hyperlocals and community sites. What have you observed? What have you seen happening? You've been supporting people putting their stories together and everything today. What have you noticed?
Nothing different to what we expected, really. It's really been about the people and the communities, and as Matt said, less about the policies. And it was quite interesting to see it was the policies that were presented by the political parties to start with, and actually may as well have kind of torn those press releases for the majority of it and gone, actually what we are interested in on a local level is what happens when I walk into my post office. Is it going to close on my school or my hospital? So it's very much about a local level. Delighted that we've been able to bring the hyperlocals together today with the politicians, and it's worked really well, and just the volume of stories that's come out of today. Moving forward, what I'd like to see is a way of us maintaining this relationship, but actually making sure it's still feasible, because you guys, as you say, you work by yourself, you've got other jobs, you volunteers, and that is the nature of hyperlocal, is that people tend to do it in their own time. So it's fitting in. Somebody's not going to come and sit here all day, every day, and cover the goings on, but just keeping those lines of communication open, that they know where to go and how to get those stories. Because we do hear a lot that people say, it'd be great if only I could think about something that was going on. It's, we've only got a really small community, and it's teaching hyperlocals that all this stuff that happens in the assembly is very, very relevant to them and their communities.
Good. Now, Peter, obviously you haven't had a chance to look at all the material that's been produced out of today, but how, to what extent are you and your colleagues, do you think, aware of what's happening at hyperlocal sites and community sites, and how far do you see that as an opportunity to engage?
Well, I think every politician is in a sense hyperlocal, because you are based in a community and you're working for that community. And certainly we've had reference to the pupil deprivation grant story. I know that when we did all the press releases on that, we actually set up an interactive map so you could find out how much your school's getting on the website and stuff like that. So we're very conscious that this isn't just about the BBC and the Western Mail and big papers like the Evening Post. It is about the smaller community news as well, and how they can benefit from that and how they can use the information. So we do try to tailor our information as best as we can for those hyperlocals. I think that the issue really is finding all the hyperlocals and getting the stuff to you, and knowing what your readership is and what you're interested in. And that, I think, is the best help for us as politicians. If we know what you're after, we will tailor our stuff to fit into what you're after, and to feed it to you, because politicians, we like publicity, and and that we work there to so that people could get our message across. And I've got a lot of experience myself as being a hyperlocal journalist. I've run my own blog for 13 years now. I post daily on it. I also deliver a community newsletter in my own ward, which I put out every 6 weeks for 30 years. So, and all about local stuff. So I understand what is needed. I think the issue is, can we find those hyperlocals and feed the information to you? And I think, in a sense, that's where the disparity is. You know what you want, we know what you want to give, and it's sort of getting together and getting that worked out between us.
What do you think about this point that Matt picked up on? That, you know, a lot of traditional media focuses on the politics and, you know, who said what, when, and all the rest of it, whereas actually, you know, it's about linking policy to how it impacts people directly on the ground, and that is different in community journalism perhaps from, you know, regional or national journalism.
Absolutely. I mean, in terms of the pupil deprivation grant, my newsletter will actually say how much each school will get. I go, as a politician, visit the local schools to find out what exactly they're doing with that money. I'm a politician, not a journalist. I don't tend to report on that, but I will feed that back into the Assembly. And of course, you know, that can also be fed into the hyperlocals as well. You know, I go to a school in my region. I find, in terms of pupil deprivation grant, they use it to get kids to come to school and pastoral care rather than just educational, because if you get the kids into school, you can educate them. If they're not there, you can't educate them. That's a really one aspect of how a particular school is using that money. Other schools are pooling it, and all sorts of experiences like that are all there for us to, we learn about that, we feed that back into our policy decisions, and we then try to disseminate that information out at a level which people will be interested in it.
And finally, just thinking about the potential of hyperlocals, have you noticed over a period of time this democratic deficit opening up? Do you think people are less well informed now than they were
absolutely
10, 20 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, that is the case. I mean, people don't always know what's going on. They tend to get the news from the big dailies and the TV. You don't tend to, you know, and maybe gossip on the school doorstep, you know, at the school gate. I mean, there is a gap there. You go on the doorsteps, you talk to people, and you ask them, and you talk to them about general politics, and you have to tell them what's going on, and people don't always relate what they see on their TV to what's happening in their community. And in a sense, that's our fault as politicians for not getting that message across properly, but also maybe not using the relevant media to get that message across.
And do you think you were saying earlier, you think you need to engage with hyperlocals differently to the way you would engage with a local newspaper or radio?
Yeah, we try to tailor, we need to tailor our message to the relevant media. So in terms of hyperlocals, you'll be interested in what affects your particular community, or if you're a subject-based blog or a subject-based paper, what relates to your particular subject. And equally, I mean, it's no different to the education spokesperson doing a special story for the Times Educational Supplement as doing a special story for what's happening in Petra School in Swansea, for example. And so we have to tailor our message to the relevant media. The issue really is knowing where that media is and making sure you can get that information to them. And the other issue, I think, actually is time as well, because we do live busy lives. We do have staff to help us, but we have to basically tailoring every press release does take a lot of time. So that is another issue which we have to overcome.
Okay, I'm going to open it up now to the audience. If you could put your hands up if you'd like to say anything and wait for a microphone and just tell us who you are. But I'd be particularly interested in hearing from other people who've been involved in this hack day, this news day, and what you've discovered and how you found it, and how we might build on this and take it forward in terms of trying to build this relationship so we can report what's happening and what's impacting communities better. So who'd like to kick off? Otherwise, I'll start picking on people. So. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Ed Townsend. I'm a former journalist, former PR person, former press officer for Mike German in the National Assembly, and I'm now starting Bay TV in Swansea. So I've got quite a wide perspective on the subject that we've been looking at today. Can I just make a couple of comments about the start of the day? First of all, the commitment of the presiding officer to being here was pretty good, because it kind of made you feel as though it was important and it was part of the agenda. I felt that and a few people I've spoken to agree with this during the day, I felt the political parties, with one exception, were less than committed to what they're doing. Paul Plaid Cymru, I'm afraid, were on their way to the conference, but they still managed to produce Clear Griffith for you, so, I mean, fair play to them. I did feel that the Conservative Party and the Labour Party were guilty of a bit of from the platform this morning in saying really very little to us other than we don't like them and they don't like us. Didn't take much from that, although in conversations later in the day, the press officer from the Labour Party was happy to search out a spokesperson for us. beyond that, I think one of the great things to come out of today is the possibility that there might be an acceptance within, first of all, the National Assembly, and I don't doubt that there's an acceptance, because it's the National Assembly that has the database of names. But it would be interesting to see whether the political parties can adopt a different approach. One that is not confrontational between themselves, but is inclusive to the people they represent. And I think if we collectively, as hyper-local, very local journalists or reporters or bank clerks or whatever it is we do for a living, but write for the people who live in the area, if they can reach out to that group of people, then I think there will be a possibility that the democratic deficit could disappear. But it's a bit hard for Matt to overcome the Daily Mail in Roath. Even though Matt's much more relevant to Roath, the Daily Mail will still appeal to those near peccadilloes that people have about politics. So there's quite a lot to overcome, but given that we're not competing, what we're doing is adding on a different level to what goes on in the reporting of political activity. Political activity means things happen to people in their homes and schools and hospitals, and it's getting that link right. I think that's this group of people in the room can really help with that.
Good, thank you very much. Okay, who else would like to come in? While you're formulating your questions, I'm going to come back to Matt and Ben to say, so Ed mentioned the kind of briefings this morning, and one or two people did say they felt that the parties hadn't really pitched them or understood what it was about. Is that true of your dealings with the political parties in general outside of today as well, or how do you...
No, I think that was a symptom perhaps of the platform or a platform being provided. Certainly our experience of dealing with AMs at a local level has been nothing but positive. They're very supportive, they come to events we promote, and they generally communicate very well about those specific things that are happening in the area. Where we're perhaps not doing it as well at the moment is translating Welsh Government or National Assembly policy into those kind of local stories. So where there's local activity, I think the relationship's pretty good. The stuff we've done today, if we can do more of that, we'll just add to actually getting some of those more important policy messages out and translated at a local level. I think, to Ed's point, there's obviously a place for the Daily Mails to do the political stuff. If it's even at a Cardiff level, we wouldn't do it. There's no gap there. Wales Online can do that, or the Echo can do that. It's where there's a gap, where nobody else is doing anything in Roath, is where we see a role for us.
Ben, did you say the same?
My area is Cwmbran. I get some things from local sort of politicians. I haven't really put any on the spot. I did try and meet my local AM today, but she was unavailable. That's something I like to sort of come back to. But for me, sort of back to time and stuff, and the link between the big policies and the local stuff, I need to be sort of guided and sent really pretty relevant information, not, looking at a 100-page PDF today was a bit mind-blowing. I find that my local councils aren't the best at sharing stuff with me, although I've got a good relationship with them sort of personally. Professionally, I'm sort of probably bottom of the list receiving stuff. But then, because I'm so nosy, I'd pick anything up that anyone says or Googles about my town. But it's a lot of work, and I wouldn't mind a bit of extra support about saying that there's a really local, interesting thing here, not a 100-page PDF. Yeah. Find the link to your town or your readers.
Yeah, it's a bit more tailoring. Okay. Yes.
Hi, Leighton Andrews, Assembly Member for the Rhondda. I just wanted to say two things, really. One is, in my capacity as Assembly Member for the Rhondda, I've been very involved in helping Rhondda people get underway in our own area, and with the support of the journalism school as well. And I don't think you should underestimate the potential role of Assembly members as resources in getting those initiatives established in local communities and being brokers for bringing together organisations who might have an interest in hyperlocal news providers being established in local communities, bringing together local businesses who might advertise, bringing together local community groups who will want to see information circulated and so on. And I think that's a role we played. In fact, we've also been involved, of course, in helping the development of the website in a much more practical sense as well as Rhondda People started off. But it's now well under its own steam. I think Tyler's there in the audience, and they're doing a fantastic job, and they're starting to get some real traction, I think, around some of the issues. The same thing I wanted to say was, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to exploit the opportunity. As Minister for Public Service, we'll be publishing a white paper in the new year about the future vision for local government, if you like. And one of the things that we will be saying within that is there'll be quite a strong message about the engagement of local government with communities. And I do think, again, that this is an area where we obviously want to see more transparency, we want to see more connection with communities, and I think there's real opportunities in that agenda for hyperlocals as well. So I hope very much people will respond to that and look for those opportunities to be part of engaging a different vision of local government in the future and a different relationship between local communities and local government. And I'm going to do that dreadful thing of having spoken as a politician and leaving immediately afterwards, so apologies.
Thank you very much, Leighton. Okay, anybody else who's been involved in doing the reporting today who'd like to talk a little bit about what they've done and how it's gone and what they've discovered? Come on, don't be shy. I can just sit here and you know, we can play chicken until someone speaks.
I don't know, journalists might have questions to ask.
Well, maybe that's a difference, you see. Maybe that's a difference.
Yeah, I'll chip in then. And I just think it's been really great to see what can be achieved when government is open and willing to engage with the likes of the motley crew, I guess, that's present here in different guises as bloggers, citizen journalists, whatever you want to call yourselves. But very clearly relevant to getting all sorts of news in different formats to reach different audiences. So I think it's really great, and I, really would like to applaud the Assembly for and Cardiff University for really, giving this some real weight and giving us some real motivation to do what we continue to do on a daily basis. But I'd like to pick up on the matter of localism, is how perhaps the Assembly and Assembly members can support us in our roles to try and open up the doors, as they have done in England with the legislation driven through by Eric Pickles, so that we can have the same abilities to attend council meetings and report on them openly and have the same sort of privileges that our sort of colleagues, if you want to put it that way, across the border do. So I don't know if that relates to the white paper the Assembly member just mentioned.
I think there's only one major difference, I think, between England and Wales in terms of the ability of journalists to attend local councils, which is that in England, the councils can't stop you filming or recording a meeting, whereas in Wales they can, because I think Eric Pickles actually legislated for that, and we did try to change that here as well, because you of course remember what happened in Carmarthen with a local journalist there trying to record that meeting. My view is that councils are starting to webcast meetings, which is one way of getting their message across. But I think really what they're a bit scared of people creating their own content. And I know I'm being a member of Swansea Council, and I've sat in meetings there where someone's trying to take a photograph and people are objecting to their images being taken. Councillors objecting to their images being captured, almost as if they're capturing their soul. And I think that is something which is a bit worrying, because I think politicians should be open. We should allow people to pick their own content from meetings, and that's what democracy is all about, and openness. But in terms of government, I mean, this is the Assembly as opposed to the government, the Welsh Government. Governments aren't naturally open and transparent. You've got to sort of force it out of them. The Assembly, this is the Parliament side of things, and our interest is to engage and to get people to engage with the Assembly. The government's interest is to try to, all politicians really, we try to channel information we want you to have, as opposed to the information you want to have. And in a sense, the tension there is between what you want and what we want you to have, and how you get that information. And the Freedom of Information Act helps there, but in a sense, sometimes you're going to have to work very hard to get that information out which you really want. And I think that in a sense, that's a good hyper-local journalist is where you can do that.
I want to throw out, I mean, to you, Peter, but also to anybody else who might want to pick it up. I mean, a lot of traditional journalism is quite confrontational with politics. It's holding politicians to account. It's representing their readers' complaints. It's, you know, all of those sorts of bread and butter issues, even for local papers. Is that different, do you think, for hyper-locals who maybe have a slightly different perspective, a slightly different take on the relationship of their community to what's happening in local politics?
I think it can be different. I think the issue about confrontational journalism is that the more the more the politician needs the journalist, the more the journalist can be confrontational. Because, you know, when you want to be on the BBC, when you want to be on the big national papers, then they can afford to be confrontational with you because the politician can't afford to cut them off. I think when you have a very local website which maybe has a readership of a few hundred or whatever like that, and you start getting confrontational, the politician really can afford to ignore you. I mean, they shouldn't, but they can afford to ignore you. And some politicians get very defensive about this confrontational approach. And my view is that that's the journalist's job. You know, you've got to work with it. But at the same time, you know, we can work with each other to get good stories. You know, it doesn't have to be confrontation unless you really are struggling to get the information out. We can work with each other to get the sort of stories that you want, and the sort of stories we'd like to give you in terms of what the community wants to know, what is going to get you readers. You know, the community may want to know what exactly the local school is doing with that grant. They may want to know what is happening in a particular road scheme. And, you know, working with the politician, you can get a lot of inside information which you can put on your media, which the community will work. So sometimes it's a bit of both, really.
I mean, Emmy, you've worked for the BBC and now you're working helping hyperlink. Do you think there's a difference in approach, difference in what they need, what, you know?
Definitely. I think it's the value, as you were saying, it's the value that people put on mainstream journalism as opposed to local journalists. And it's a big difference in the types of stories they cover as well. I think it is definitely a much more good news stories. I think when you get to community level, it's not the negative stories. So the big newspapers tend to do the negative stories, whereas on a community level, from my experience, apart from the old sort of campaign where you're campaigning, but it's usually campaigning for something better in your community. So that's the kind of the only negative thing, is if you're fighting against some force to better your community. But certainly working with Public Caerdydd and on the people, it's less hard news and more stories about people and things that are happening in the area.
Would you'd agree, Ben and Matt? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that hard news is being done by somebody else anyway. You know, there's not necessarily a place for us to do it. And I think the other issue is very few of us are actually trained journalists. So there's a confidence and an appropriateness consideration there in terms of how confrontational we want to be and how controversial we feel that we can be, given that we might not have that kind of that kind of legal knowledge or backup.
Someone pointed out to me earlier today that, of course, the group of you that were here today, if you amalgamated all of your different readerships, it would probably be equivalent to or more than any of the Wales daily papers. So there's a power, collective strength there as well, isn't there? She's something perhaps to reflect on going forward. Yeah.
That's something that we are really keen moving forward, and that's something that's very much part of our strategy, is building a network of community journalists so that they have this ability to lean on somebody else. So they're not to say you sort of sitting there by yourself and you're thinking, I'm not quite sure about this, or I'm a bit tired, maybe my tone's a bit wrong, that you have a space that you can reach out to somebody else. So that we're actually working on another phase on our website now, and if anyone's got any feedback on anything that you think that we could help on a community journalism level, but we're looking at having a private forum. So if you want to discuss things like costings and things that you don't want to make public, there's a space there where you can speak to other people in the same boat as you, ask questions. And we're even thinking about things like press releases. So we don't get press releases. I say we because I'm involved as well on a community level with lots of publications. We don't get the press releases, same as Peter was saying, it's difficult sometimes. It's time, money, priorities to get that news out to community. So what we're hoping is to capture the big guys and get them to send press releases to us, and we'll put them on our website for you all to be able to access. And hopefully it'll work in the same way as we've done today, as you get the national stories of the big angle and find your local angle to it.
Can I just say on press release, I mean, we're always willing to put email addresses onto our press release distribution list. It may not be appropriate to, but you get a press release which is a sort of more national or bigger local one. You can always then contact us and say, well, what's the local angle on this? So if you want to give us your email addresses to go on our press lists, you may be bombarded with stuff you can't use or don't like. But every now and again, you'll find some which, well, actually, what's the local angle on this? And that's one way of getting content.
Sorry, can I just interrupt there? Can I just ask, what value do you think your fellow AMs put on hyperlocal journalists?
I'm not speaking my other AM. I couldn't possibly, because I think, there are 60 AMs, and there's probably 60 different views on that. I mean, I think all of us, though, value our local communities and value getting across information on local communities. I mean, I think you referred in Roth, the AM always comes along to the events, and if you put on an event or something in our local community, we'll try and come along to it and help support it. And I think all the AMs will take that view. And I think if you go up to your AM and say, look, I have a readership of, 100, 200, a bit more than that, and if you give me stuff, I'll put it on there, they'll do that. And it's just a question, I think, of getting them to send you stuff. As I say, it may not always be appropriate, it may not always be at the right level, but every now and again there'll be something there you can pull out and get a local angle on.
Okay, sorry.
I was just going to add, I think there is sort of almost an attitude of they support the hyperlocal as a community initiative and don't always necessarily see it as a media outlet.
Yeah. You've got to explain that to us.
But yeah, absolutely. I think there's a job for both to do there.
Yeah. Okay, Tim, you wanted to...
Hi, fascinating discussion. Tim Hartley, Chair of Royal Television Society Wales and occasional contributor to Made in Cardiff, the local TV station, speaking in a purely personal capacity. Just want to sound a note of caution, and I'm not trying to be negative, is that we need to recognise communities of interest rather than communities of geography. I'll give you 2 examples here. Gareth here owns Land of Post, a website. It's not on my favourites bar, but Cardiff City message board is on my favourites bar. That's my community of interest. Similarly, Matt from the Assembly put me in the direction of Port Talbot Magnet before this conference. I went there. The last update was the 10th of October, and it was about the closure of St Joseph's Comprehensive School in Port Talbot, 6th form. I've seen more traffic on the Facebook page about don't close St Joseph's 6th form than I've seen updates on the Port Talbot Magnet. So I'm just giving you 2 examples of communities of interest, and I'd be interested to know how you either use and exploit that interest from other areas, or you actually say, well, maybe we're doing this wrong geographically. Even to the hyperlocal, it may be that what Gareth thinks is of interest in Llandaff is not actually of interest to me who actually live there. And similarly, how do you draw in those elements of, say, a sporting interest, educational or whatever, without then saying, well, this isn't to do with us. I'm not interested in it. We are just doing geographical. So in a sense, it's just a note of caution. And how do you actually bridge that?
Can I just say that a lot of Assembly members do engage with Facebook pages. I'm a member of quite a lot of Facebook pages in my own region, including St Joseph's one, which I've been to meetings on that as part of my responsibilities as a regional AM. So, Facebook in particular is actually quite an important medium for AMs as well in terms of, and you're right, a lot of people actually do their sort of hyperlocal journalism through a Facebook page often in that regard as well. And I also often tweet to the Swansea fans page as well. So, because again, that's a community of interest. So you're right, we do tend to try to engage that as politicians.
Okay, anyone else who runs a site want to talk about the community of interest versus geography point? No.
I'll briefly, if nobody else will. One of the things we found just looking at the kind of stats around what people are searching for and what was bringing them to the site was that there was a substantial interest in local history. And any time we did anything about local history, we were getting enormous traffic. So from that built more of a local history section into the site, encouraged people to give us guest posts, even got to the point where obviously the centenary of the First World War was coming up, and started a side project called Roth Remembers that we went for Heritage Lottery funding for and got, and I think that's probably an example of where we'd spotted an interest emerging from the site, because otherwise it would just be our opinion of what we think would be interesting, but that came from the analytics behind the site and the response we were getting, and has led to a whole sort of second side project, if you like. So, you know, I think it is absolutely a point that you can't just go down the route of doing the things that you're interested in.
Yeah, that was a good point, Tim. Thanks. Yep.
Hi, Matt Dix from the National Assembly. I want to take it back to pure logistics of the day and ask a simple question. Once you decided which story to pursue, how did you find sourcing and harvesting the content you needed to cover that story from Assembly platforms such as the website and such as the YouTube channels and Senedd TV, etc.? And what do you think could be improved to make that job easier?
Anybody in the audience want to pick that up before I come up to the panel? Sally?
I would just say it's an awareness really of what's there, and I think for us at the beginning, I'm here with some students from Cardiff University, and I think just knowing where to look and where to go was an initial issue, and I think for any hyperlocal starting out, if you don't have that kind of journalistic background about the obvious places what to do, it's quite difficult to make a start, and obviously we came to you quite a few times asking for help. So I think that kind of transparency and awareness online is really important, and I think that was a bit of a tricky start for us because of that, not knowing quite where to go to look for things, and thankfully you were here, Matt, to help us. So I don't know. It's almost like you need a how-to guide for, you know. It's almost like at a basic level. I think maybe for some of us here, it's at the right level, but for some people who perhaps are starting out as a hyperlocal site who aren't trained journalists or haven't got any interest in news in that sense, trying to make it as easy as possible and simple for people to understand about how they access that information. Once you get there, you're okay, but you did need to help us out in the beginning.
Anyone else want to pick up on the practicalities, the logistics of finding stuff out? How do you find it?
I did have a look at the story, the domestic violence bill story, and the website team in the back showed me around how that fits in with the website, and I was quite impressed once we got there. And the sort of the timeline of you know, each discussion that bill had been discussed at, along with links to the webcast. I didn't realise it was open as it was, and all in sort of one place. But again, it's getting to it and, you know, realising where it is.
Yeah. Erin, is that something that you know, maybe the centre could think about, you know, doing more guidance on news gathering and research?
Yeah, if that's something that people would find useful. Again, anything you think would be of use, let us know. We've got a resources section on the website. I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch because it's not. But we do have a resources section, and it's there for you guys. It's not for us. And we feed off whatever you think you need. So if you need how-to guides on how to access information, then I'm more than happy to work with Matt on getting those and putting them up on the website.
Workshops or something.
Yeah.
It's at this point I remember that Matt giving me a list of things I've got to promote. Which is, I mean, actually the Assembly website does have a very good search facility as well. And of course, Senedd TV it isn't just you can search Senedd TV, you can actually take clips out and embed it in your sites, which I've done on my own blog. So, you know, if you have a story about a particular issue, I mean, let's go back to the St. Joseph's Sixth Form. That's been raised in the Assembly. You can actually pull out that clip and you can put it on a Facebook page or you can put it on a website to add to the content. So there is quite a lot of resource there which the Assembly itself promotes, which people can access as part of that. And I know as an Assembly member, I'm often getting emails from people in my region, you know, just ordinary constituents. I'm often sort of send them links to various things on the Assembly site. This is where you'll find information about this bill or this about this, you know. So again, you can just ask your Assembly member sometimes and they can point stuff to you. But of course, there's always the mainstay of every journalist, which is Google.
Other search engines are available.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, any final questions or anybody wants to ask, or points arising out of the day that people would like to make before we draw it to a close? Yes, at the back there.
I just wanted to comment just on the last topic. I use Sam Knight's Your Senedd service, where he sends out a weekly summary of what is being debated in the National Assembly, and I find that quite useful to sort of look at and see if there's anything that I think could be potentially relevant to sort of go then and have a look. But just to comment on the website itself, I think it is, my story was kind of what is the Assembly, what is people's understanding of what they are and what they do, and I think there probably is quite a lack of understanding by a lot of people. But I think the Assembly website does a good job of spelling out the business of the Assembly, its responsibilities, its connection with the Welsh Government, and it was easy to navigate and find the information I needed. So
That's a good, handy tip. Okay, any final call for any last thoughts or points? No, well, in that case, I'd sorry, yeah.
One thing, because Matt will kill me as well as Peter.
Matt's obviously briefed everyone except me. That's fine.
No, there's the evaluation forms that were in all your packs. If you could please fill those in before you leave. Otherwise, my neck, I'm for it. So if you could fill those in before you leave, it would really help us to kind of get a proper assessment of how you found today and how we can help make things better for you.
Okay, and
the one other plug is in December we're going to be launching an Assembly app, which will be able to access all the information from your mobile phone.
great. Any other publicity promotions, people? No? Okay. In that case, I'd just like to thank Matt and his team for putting on and hosting the day, the presiding officer for sponsoring it and for giving up her time to promote it, to all of you for being here and working hard and making what I think was a really interesting day. And then finally, perhaps you just join me in thanking the panel who've been up here this afternoon. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.